Hello, my name is Rocco Strangio, and I'm the host of the Law, AI, and Money podcast. I bring on attorneys, engineers, and entrepreneurs to unravel the world of AI and to discuss how it'll affect the legal profession. Today, I'm joined with Maury Goldstein, an attorney at the mass tort law firm Aylstock, Witkin, Kreis Overholtz, better known as AWKO. Mory was pivotal in leading the fight against 3M in the Combat Arms Earplugs litigation. And Mory was also involved in the Xarelto litigation, which resulted in a $775 million settlement for plaintiffs. Thank you for joining our conversation. Hey, Mory, how's it going?
Hey Rocco, good to see you today, bud.
It's nice seeing you as well. Thank you for taking the time and coming on my podcast. I know you're really busy, both at 3M and everything else going on. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me here today, Rocco.
Yeah. Before we get into the discussion, if you could just briefly give us a little bit of background on how you got involved in mass torts with AWKO, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So my name is Maury Goldstein. I'm here in Pensacola, Florida, with Aylstock, Witkin, Kreis Overholtz. I've been an associate with them for almost 3 years now, but I've been with them for nearly 10 years. So I've traveled in mass torts. I've worked on both sides of the aisle on the attorney and paralegal side, and I've attended a lot of trials. A lot of what we did in my early part of my work here was in trial, and so the 3M trials, I went to the majority of those and saw a significant amount of bellwethers and a significant amount of work with dealing with experts, getting them to trial, getting through Daubert, and ultimately, getting them on a stand and seeing them perform in court. So I've really gotten a good chance to get a perspective of that life cycle of a case, and then the dissolution side and looking through the data and being tech oriented and really being interested in data engineering and the way that we look at mass torts as a whole, since we have these really unique problems of dealing with a lot of people, a lot of data, and that volume can get very cumbersome and leave a lot of room for the technology to help or hinder, depending on how well you are able to leverage that technology. And we've seen certainly a lot of improvements, and it's taken some pitfalls along the way in the mass tort world to get there. But I think everyone's always interested in doing things better and faster and cheaper if you can get all that combination.
For sure. You guys spearheaded the largest mass tort litigation in those the 3M cases. And you guys have largely wrapped that up. It's in the process of being wrapped up. For those of my viewers that are not aware, could you briefly explain what mass torts are and how it's shaping society?
Sure. So mass tort litigation is looking at these tortious acts, but for a large number of people that are somewhat similarly situated. So drugs and devices are oftentimes one of the big fields of mass torts, or chemical spills, where you see the unique injuries might vary amongst the population of individuals, but they all have this sort of root cause. Someone might even look at like the Baltimore Bridge. It has this root cause of someone hitting the bridge, but you could look at business interruption. You have actual death claims. You have all of these property claims. So you have different types of claims that fit within this network that have this systemic origin, or a drug or device that really is causing this network of injuries.
Yeah. It's almost like an alternative to regulation. You guys are on the ground litigating against these companies to force their hand to regulate themselves, with the idea that in the future they're not going to want to expose themselves to more litigation.
I think that's definitely a big dynamic in plaintiff litigation, and helping to right that balance of corporate greed, and them wanting to make sure they take those safety precautions and design drugs and products that are safe. That's certainly part of the balance is the plaintiff's attorney bar.
Yeah. So transitioning into the tech more, how does your firm currently utilize AI in order to improve each of your firm's attorneys' ability to practice law?
Yeah, I think AI right now for us is so cutting edge that it's really in the evaluation stage. I think a lot of firms are trying to figure out where does AI fit into what they do, and mass torts certainly have unique problems to try to solve at the volume that we do, and just 1,000 clients is a large inventory, but a somewhat normal amount of clients for a law firm to have in mass tort as an example. And they may have, even more than that, 5, 6 times that. And so trying to figure out how do we use this, the repetitive nature of dealing with large volumes, but accuracy, you can't at all sacrifice that accuracy. And so is it then at a cost and time saving? So it's something that I think we're still evaluating as a whole. There's certainly some products, and I think we'll probably talk about some of them that are law oriented. Westlaw, Lexis, they're both introducing the AI technologies. We've seen and vetted those somewhat. I think those are certainly at a point where people are starting to be able to look at whether that works for them. And that's probably a large part of it too. And then there's a certain confidence level, and certainly as attorneys and putting your license on things that you're submitting, that hallucination, it is much more real, I think, than some people might really believe it is. I think you see it in the news, and hallucination is this big scary word but it's certainly
submitted that complaint or brief or whatever.
He might have been in New York. I think, yeah, I don't think he was New York, but exactly though. But that hallucination, and you don't know what you don't know, and I think that's some of probably, as we talk about this, the pitfall of AI is that you have to quality control. You have to check so much, and if you're really doing a lot of this double checking, the question for some people and in some processes is the double checking now taking enough time that you didn't save time on the front side, because you have to be as accurate, you have to be cheaper and quicker. You need at least two of those and the accuracy to maintain in order for it to replace what you're currently doing. Humans aren't 100% accurate, okay, but it has to be better. We can't accept it to be not as good as if I were to pick up the file and look through AI. So I think in vetting that and deciding when you have to go back and double check, is it doing it? And there's a lot of argument, and I hear a lot of people talk about, well, we use it for first drafts. AI is really good jumping off point. And so there's some argument that, if you skip that initial groundwork, that even if you're just writing a letter to your clients, I'm going to stop and think about what I want to communicate. What is the foundation for the project or the steps that I'm taking? If you kind of cut that by using AI to get to that first step, sometimes you cut a lot of that, processing that you would have done. And there's some argument for, is that really for the better? And remedial and repetitive tasks, certainly not. But those are also the more detail oriented. And so you start to look at that, the amount of time it takes to check that work. Yeah. And so for us, and you asked, where AWKO is, I think we're still in the vetting process. I think a lot of firms really don't want to get left behind, and we're certainly in that camp. No one does. But we're scared to misstep, and you don't want to be that person on the news that's getting their bar license, reviewed and having that hallucination that you filed on the record. So I think there's certainly a lot of reservation too.
That poor guy is cemented in every discussion surrounding AI.
Well, you don't know his name, so you could meet him and wouldn't know, but he does. But yeah, no one wants to be that. No one wants to be that.
It's almost like, having talked to a guest prior on this podcast, it's almost like the AI systems have to be 99.99% effective and safe, in the same sense that, let's say U.S. drivers are 99.9% safe. We'll only trust self-driving cars if they're another level above that, because there is a certain level of trust that comes with trusting humans versus a machine, right? Because for whatever reason, both biological and practical reasons, we sort of trust humans more so than machines. But I wanted to ask you, do you guys currently use any AI platforms apart from Westlaw and Lexis and whatever AI technology they've embedded in their systems?
So I think we haven't really taken a stance of encouraging AI. I think that people who are interested and interested in seeing how that might work into their system or how they operate as an attorney, or are exploring those options. So um, we haven't really we haven't encouraged the use of it. We aren't endorsing any single platform or use, and we are still using some and vetting some. But I think in terms of, we're going to shift to this, revolutionary new platform, or we're looking at ChatGPT. We're using those LLM style Copilot and vetting those. And does that hold a place where at the attorney or the paralegal or the mailroom or the reception, are there levels at which it makes sense to implement that? And I think at this point, we're still in the vetting process and not comfortable with we're going to leap into all of those yet. But we also aren't restricting. I think a lot of firms are restricting the AI, and they say, we're not going to have that near our systems, and certainly there's security risk and being safe. But I think we're not quite there. We don't want to get left behind, and I think vetting and being able to look at that is important.
In terms of affecting the mass tort landscape, do you foresee AI being used in courtrooms? Do you foresee it being used as a supplement to judges or a tool for judges to help vet cases in mass torts, like bellwethers, for example? Could we see a future where AI is set up to sort of sample mass tort cases in order to forecast which mass torts have certain claimant sizes and settlement amounts?
Yeah, I do think you'll start to see some more of that. I do think you even see that a little bit today. People trying to strip the census data. OCR is what actually the computer is stripping off the page. It's what the interpreted language that the computer is able to read. So even down to handwriting on census forms has gotten very advanced and very good. And so I do think you are seeing some of that, especially in the census world, and I could see it start to bleed some. Especially as we're able to crunch through medical records a lot faster. What actually exists and what's there starts to become more tangible when you look at a large population of people in an MDL, or even trying to synthesize. And we see bellwethers is one of those examples of, can we take statistically sometimes relevant, sometimes not relevant sampling, because you have to do so much work now to go through medical records and to crunch that data. And even then, most of the issue, I think, is going to be, and something that we struggle with as a large volume firm, is a structured data. So just because you have people go and open medical records and look at them, how do you take 10,000 medical records and create something tangible of how many instances of X, Y, Z, B, if this, then that? Did they have diabetes if they fell into these groups? Did they have these comorbidities? To be able to really data engineer what's in there and be able to look at those combinations of things may become a better option in the future. But I think today, in terms of looking through inventories and understanding that, is a bit of a struggle and a process. But I do think more, I'll say simple, but shorter documents or more structured documents like census, you have a better chance of being able to strip the data and actually be able to manipulate the outputs or understand what's in that large data set.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think there are for sure opportunities, but there are also barriers to widespread implementation, both on the individual attorney level, but also for these mass tort firms like AWKO that handle hundreds of thousands of claimants. One of those issues I foresee is privacy, specifically relating to data. And that's been a big concern and the source of litigation against OpenAI and other social media companies. Are there any other barriers besides data privacy that you foresee are going to prevent widespread implementation, both at the individual firm level, working with single event and single claimant cases, but also on the mass tort level?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest struggles that you'll see from the AI adoption is confidence and trying to gain confidence in something you don't understand. So I'm very interested in AI and tech, and I mean, I've rudimentary understanding of the way that the LLMs or neural concepts will work, but I still don't to have a confidence that you understand what it's going to return and that unknown variable, especially for firms that aren't as into the tech side of this, and for single event firms that may have absolutely no real understanding or confidence in the technology and utilizing that type of technology, and they don't have programmers on staff and maintain large IT departments like some of the mass tort firms are familiar with and comfortable with, and have these advisors that they can get. But I think that confidence in jumping from, I understand humans aren't perfect, but it's an understandable system. It's a known system that we've just dealt with, even if it's imperfect. So I do think that leap, but it's a larger leap when you don't really understand how it is that you're doing what you're doing. And so that also leaves room for error. And I think that's the second problem, not problem, but hurdle, is you have to understand that the AI is going to do a better job than humans, or at least as good of a job. It has to be quicker and cheaper, or at least quicker or cheaper, but it must do at least as good of a job as humans. So that you have to first determine how good are the humans at doing whatever the task is that you're doing. And then you have to vet, does AI do better? And sometimes that process of figuring that out can be as burdensome as the task, especially if you're looking at low volume. If you're looking at a single event, to the amount of reward that you get for putting in that time to vet that system may be a tougher bridge to cross if it's only something you're doing 12 times a year. You're doing a full case workup, or however many times it is that you're bringing single events, versus I have 1,000 cases I need to do this for. Those numbers and that investment in time to get to a point where you have that confidence vastly changes.
Hey, trial lawyers. Did you know that you can strategically plan your contingency fees around taxes, life's milestones, and even your retirement goals? By working with Milestone, your fee income can be spread, grown, and secured. We'll work with you and your financial advisor to personalize a periodic payment schedule that fits your needs. To learn more, visit milestone7th.com today.
I definitely agree with that economies of scale. It's easier to think about the use cases when you're dealing with so many claimants, and it becomes a numbers game where the main issues you're dealing with is data and numbers and crunching. And that's what AI ultimately, at the level that we're at right now, is good at. It's interesting because on the flip side, on the defense side, Walmart already uses AI algorithms to give settlement amounts to slip and fall cases in various Walmarts. And so it's being used on the defense side, at least at the corporate level, to vet cases and to vet claims. And so it's interesting to see how the plaintiff bar responds to that.
I think it'll be interesting to see it as the data becomes more readily accessible, and the way that changes things. I think it will be interesting, and as accuracy gets better, I think we certainly see. I mean, every 3 months, you're seeing new products come out. You're seeing new capabilities. Watson's on the verge. We are looking at big leaps, and staying up to date with it's going to be interesting, and how that affects the snowball of what we do as attorneys and discovery and the debates, and certainly ESI will continue to grow and become nuanced and more complex.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many nuances. I believe in France, they've already banned the use of AI to sort of pinpoint certain, to basically get a feel for how judges will rule on cases at the deepest level. So like AI systems in France have been used to see what likes and dislikes and fears may be associated with various judges. And so they put a stop to that. And that goes into what we won't get into today, but there's been a EU Bill of Rights associated with AI that's been legislated. And the thought is that it's going to regulate the entire world's AI systems by virtue of companies having to scale to that strict standard both in the EU and as a result across the world. And what I wanted to get into is whether you think AI is ready for use in mass torts today, but it sounds like we're still at the early stages where we need to understand this and equip ourselves before there's widespread implementation.
I think it really depends on the task. I think it depends on what you're trying to do with it. I think, this concept of widespread, it probably varies a lot from person to person. And I think people expect it to do a lot of remedial tasks really well at a really high accuracy. And it can, but you really need models or systems that are curated and likely developed. These most people's interactions are with this LLM. That's a large language model. That's ChatGPT, for the most part, Copilot. That interactive modeling, and that's where the hallucinations can come into existence. And so we have seen, and single event attorneys, I think, would be mesmerized by what those things can do. It really can crunch a deposition and give you a fairly accurate results and link those results. Its interpretation it has a hard time with, or being thorough sometimes in the large language models. But I think that it's right on the edge. I think for some people and some firms and some tasks, it is there. There are things it could do. I do think at this point, a lot of that is either very early understanding of things. So it will get you, and one thing I say AI does is it will get you from 0 to 60 very quick, much quicker than if you were to try to do it on your own. But sometimes getting past that point can take a little longer because you've skipped that fundamental foundation, like we were talking about, of forming ideas and connections and processes and understanding. And you move so fast that you're just intaking. You're not always making those neural links and having those, those connections and making that as you move forward. So I do think that it definitely has some places, and it really is specific for people at this point and what they're trying to do and what their expected outcome is. But I think it's happening so fast that it's something that we're going to see enter the space at a rapid speed. I think we're going to see more of these data engineering firms start to pop into the space, and probably from the mass tort side and the other side of personal injury. And so we know the advertisers are big, but I do think the data engineering space is going to grow pretty exponentially as this gets better.
Has your firm explored using AI to improve discovery?
So that's something that most of the discovery companies have really packaged together. So I would say yes, not probably from an AWKO specific standpoint that we're going out and doing something unique, but some of those vendors have gotten pretty advanced, and some of them are rebranding things that we've had as new AI, but they're still very advanced concepts. So proximity searching, some of the deduplication of records, and some of them are linking things within records that are tied or tangential. So we are seeing, I would say that that's something that we've had some surface level interaction with. I do think those models are still advancing at a pretty rapid rate. So nothing specific, but we've certainly interacted with those models from the discovery platforms. And most of them have a pretty refined model. I've not seen anything that was glaringly an issue in that.
Yeah. It almost seems like as better evidence of an industry-wide shift to adoption, basically how the internet shifted the way law firms practice, and now we're seeing that with AI as well. Maury, do you think we're entering a golden age for mass torts?
That's interesting. I think we're certainly entering a golden age for technology and mass torts. If that will better the industry or better the plaintiff's bar side more than the others, I'm not certain that I would have an opinion about that today. I think we'll see how it plays out. But in terms of technology and what we're able to do, I think it's just changing. It's changing the landscape. And like all changes, no one wants to get left behind, but nobody wants to get hit by the train either out front. So I think it's really just a very intricate situation of we all want it. We all want to understand something we rarely understand as attorneys. myself certainly included. But we know that it's out there. That's a kind of incumbent on us to figure out. Everyone wants to sell us something, but does it always do what they say, and is it at the accuracy or the level that they do? And I think that is really where the strong will survive and will understand and be able to get over that hurdle of, is this something that can truly help, or am I going to spend my time on something that is very expensive, very complex, and doesn't really get me to a better end result? And when you do things at scale, there's a lot of room for error in that. If you choose to deviate off course, or the AI and that unknown, if you go into the unknown, and there's more room for error, I think that's some of the reservation there. But I do think it's cutting edge, and I do think we'll enter the golden age of technology and mass torts very shortly.
That's awesome. Mory, as a new segment that I'm doing, I ask guests one thing they would change about the world. So asking you, Maury Goldstein, what is one thing you would change about the world? Anything, if whatever it may be.
I mean, I just think everyone should be patient with everybody and be nice. I think sometimes we get a little wrapped in our own world, and we lose sight of all that, and being reasonable and just treating people with respect as humans. So it goes a long way on both sides. So that's my one takeaway.
Not self-driving cars or robots. You want everybody to have a little bit more patience.
More patience.
All right, Mory. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on. For those of you that don't know, AWKO is one of the leading mass tort firms in the space, and Maury's a rising star. I think one day, Mory, you will, you're not leading your own firm, you will be leading a mass tort. And you already are in large parts. So thank you for taking the time to come on. Your opinion and your expertise is greatly valued. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Rocco. I appreciate it.
Love it. All right. Take care. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Law, AI, and Money podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to like and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you.